The digital demo number 2, Adobe Camera Raw Digital Darkroom Equivalents. Which is to say, I'm not going to try and cover all the amazing things you could do in Camera Raw. That would take many hours. Rather, I'm going to focus on the things that you can do in the darkroom that you can also do in Camera Raw, plus a few extra things. The context here is for my students who have already worked a little bit in the darkroom, and now they're going to learn how to do similar things digitally. In any event, you're not looking at Camera Raw right now, you're looking at Adobe Bridge. So I want you all to start off in Adobe Bridge and use it to identify the pictures that interest you. I've created a collection here of images I want to use for this demo. So I'm going to start off with this picture of the red sign that I photographed a couple years ago in Mount Vernon, Ohio. So now by clicking that little aperture button, as I explained in my last demo, you can open to Camera Raw, and this is what you see. So I'll start off explaining a little bit how this dialog box is organized. On the very top, you'll see your toolbar, and we'll cover some of those tools today. On the upper right, you have your histogram, and it's very important to understand what a histogram is and how to interpret it. So basically, everything on the right side of the histogram is going to be your highlights, and everything on the left side is going to be your shadows, and everything in the middle is your midtones. And so as we make changes to our sliders in the various panels here, we're going to be changing the shape of our histogram. So we have to understand that that kind of silhouetted looking mountainscape is a graphic representation of our image. More on that as we move along. Below the histogram, we can see here our various panels. So we have our basics panel, we have our tone curve panel, our detail panel for sharpening and for reducing noise reduction, our HueSaturation luminance panel, split toning, which I won't be covering in this demo, our lens corrections. Make sure you start off by enabling your lens corrections, because sometimes if you forget that and you go back to it later, it makes your image a little lighter, and then you have to go back to the basics panel to fix that. So best to just start with that. We'll also do things like take a curved horizon and make it straight. In any event, Camera Raw knows what camera and lens you shot with, and so it will make the necessary corrections, or you can do further corrections manually. Next to that is the effects panel, which I'm not going to cover today, calibration, which I'm not going to cover today, and presets and snapshots I'll mention towards the end. Okay, so you probably want to look into some other tutorials for those things I won't be covering. On the bottom left hand corner here, you see a button you can push to determine how you will save your image. Down here underneath the image, you have a little link button that takes you into a dialog box for your presets for how your image should open in Photoshop. And that's very important, not to just go with whatever the default is. And these are different ways to open directly into Photoshop, or to cancel everything you've done, or to just save what you've done. And yeah, it's important to know how all of these things work. In the middle, of course, is your image. Let's start with the basics panel. That's going to be your default. So what kind of decisions do you make when you're working in the darkroom? Well, first of all, you ask yourself, do I like it? So that decision really you don't make in Camera Raw. You make it in Adobe Bridge. So you use Bridge, or a program like Bridge or Lightroom, to determine whether you like your picture and which ones you like. And so if you want, you can rate them or not rate them. But in any event, keep them organized so you know which ones you want to work with, which ones have potential. The second decision you're going to make is it sharp? The third decision is it well composed? The fourth decision is the value, or lightness and darkness. Correct. The fifth decision when you're working analog is the contrast correct? The sixth decision is going to be, do I need to add dodging and burning? In other words, make certain parts of the picture darker and some parts lighter. The seventh decision would be, does it need to be retouched? And the eighth decision, is there anything I can do to make this picture better? Okay, so in Photoshop and Camera Raw and Bridge, there are hundreds, perhaps more than hundreds of decisions. And so you want to know which decisions are most essential and most important. So we're going to start off with the same decisions we would have made in the darkroom and look what kind of tools we would use here in Photoshop. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to go in this order. It's just an option. So first of all, do I like it? Okay, yes. Is it sharp? I think I'll pick a different picture for is it sharp. I think I'll take this picture, which was used for a demo for stop action for my introductory class last semester, and I'm going to use my magnifying glass to zoom in here on this young lady, and I'm going to go to at least 100%, maybe even 200%, so I can see her very clearly. Yeah, it's pretty sharp, but maybe it could be sharper. So how can I increase the sharpness of this picture? The equivalent of this in the darkroom would basically be your grain focusing tool, correct? So here I'm going to go to the detail panel. Now, if I move this first slider, it's called the amount slider. Basically, that's doing as I move it to the right, it's increasing the contrast of the edge of the pixels. And that's creating the illusion of contrast. It's also creating a kind of mezzotint-like textured pattern. And so if I go too far, it's not that great. So I have to move this gingerly. Bear in mind that your camera already sharpens somewhat with the factory default, and JPEGs are already automatically sharpened. So we want to be careful how much we sharpen. So the radius slider determines how far that sharpening radiates out from those pixels. So you can see that increases and decreases it a little, not much in this case. Basically, when you're using the amount and radius sliders, it's your computer is looking for areas like the edge of the hair and so forth, the eyebrows, where there's an edge. And so to see that more clearly, you can hold down the option button and move the detail slider, and it will show you which areas, do that again, are being sharpened and which areas aren't. Because otherwise the detail slider will just sharpen everything. Well, it will sharpen everything, but this way at least you know what it's sharpening. And that's a little bit similar to a tool called High Pass in Photoshop. In any event, this probably wouldn't be the first thing I do, but it would be the first thing I do in the darkroom, so that's what I'm showing you first. Is it sharp? Okay, well, I'm going to cancel that. And I'm going to, there's another thing in that panel which deals with something that that negatives in the darkroom simply don't have, and that's called artifacting. So I'm going to zoom in really close, 200% here to this picture. I took at the Monterey Aquarium many years ago, and as you can see in the metadata that I shot this at a very high ISO. That metadata is available in Bridge. And so basically I've got a lot of artifacting. Sometimes it's called Christmas tree artifacting, because if you look really close, it's kind of red and green. And what I want to do is, if I go here to the luminance slider, that's going to significantly reduce my artifacting. But you know what? It also made it less sharp. So if I want to bring some of that sharpness back, I have to increase the detail in the slider. Maybe I'm going to back off a little bit on the luminance. Basically, I have to negotiate these three sliders to find the desired look. Okay, and so that's going to significantly improve this image. You can see if I hit the P button, I have the before, and hit it again, I have the after. All right. Okay, so let me cancel that. The next decision I'm going to make when I'm in the darkroom is, well, I'm going to be projecting a negative down onto enlarging easel, and I'm going to compose the image. And I can make decisions about how I want to crop it. So here, I'm going to think about whether or not there's any changes I want to make here. Now you could use the crop tool, although I find that the crop tool works much better in Photoshop. What I like to do in Camera Raw is use the transform tool. And then I'll click on this little grid, and I can see that that telephone pole, which is sort of like the main axis of this picture, is crooked. So I'm just going to use the rotate slider to place that in the middle of my grid, more or less. Okay, and then I'm going to unclick the grid, and you can see that it kind of screwed up the edges of my picture. So what I can do is I can simply scale that up, and I'll maintain the ratio of my picture very nicely. Okay, and again, I can hit the P button and I can see what it looked like before and after. Okay, so nothing I do in Camera Raw is permanent. It's just creating a code that won't really be permanently applied until it's exported into Photoshop or onto my desktop or onto a hard drive or wherever I want it to live. Okay, but I can still always go back to my digital negative, which is basically equivalent to my raw file. In any event, okay, so the next decision I want to make is the value correct? So I'm going to pick a different image than this because this one's pretty correct. Let's pick a really dark one. This was something I also used. I deliberately shot it underexposed so I could show what an underexposed histogram looks like to my students. As you can see, an underexposed histogram or a picture which is predominantly dark, like taken at night, will have most of the information on the left side of the display. So how do I fix that? Well, your main tool for correcting your value is actually to get it right in the first place and not have to do it. But if you do have to do it and you didn't check your histogram by hitting the info button after you took the picture, now you have to fix it. And the way to fix it is to move this exposure slider to the right. Woohoo! Now that's really something that it's able to save that much information. Now that's something you would not be able to save that degree of information from an analog negative. You would have more compromises to make in the darkroom. So this is truly a wonderful tool in Photoshop. Okay, it's not going to be as good as if you had shot it correctly, but it's going to be greatly improved. And there's probably a lot else we could do to improve this image as well. But I just wanted to show you that one for how to fix an underexposed image. As far as an overexposed image, this was part of the same, actually another demo a couple days later, where we had to go to a different room, and actually it's a different class. And this one's a little overexposed. You can see that here because there's information that goes beyond the right side of the picture. When you're shooting digitally, you'll always need to expose for the highlights. Otherwise, you're going to have a situation like this. And basically, all that information beyond here really is lost. But we can use that same slider to bring some of it back, We can also, if that looks like too extreme to the midtones, then we can use our highlight slider to take some of that away. But to see how the histogram is changing in the upper right, it's starting to look like it should have looked in the first place. Okay. We can also use our, by the way, I can always go back to normal or default position on the slider by double clicking it. Here I can move my white button to the left and so forth. Okay, so that's one way to try and fix a picture that's overexposed. There's a lot more you can do, but I'm just touching on it right now. So your next decision after value, which is determined in the darkroom by making a test strip, is then when you figure out the right value on your test strip, you just look at that one little part of your test strip and you evaluate the contrast. And if the contrast isn't good, then you use variable contrast filters to increase or decrease it. So here we're going to use something else. Let's start with maybe this picture here, which is a detail of a sculpture installation by Alan Kaprow, the performance artist. And it's called Fluids, his performance. And when I'm trying to determine contrast and to some extent exposure, I'm going to activate these highlight and shadow clipping warnings. So basically, when I'm going to start off by, my histogram looks pretty good, but if I want to increase the contrast, basically I'm going to, the simple way to do it is just to move this slider to the right or left to decrease it. See how it really changes dramatically? But it's not very subtle. So a good way to work in a subtle manner here is to start by increasing my white point. And you can see all the red that's coming up, that's going to have zero detail. So I need to back off so that I only see a tiny bit of red, and then I can move my black till I see some blue. And again, I only want just a little bit of black. And then I can use my, in this case, I'd like to see more detail in this area. So I'm going to move my highlight slider to the left, and that's bringing in quite a lot of detail. And I'd like to see maybe a little more shadow detail down here on the bottom left. So I'm going to move my shadow slider to the right. Now I've got a much more interesting picture, I think. I'm going to hit the P button again to show you the difference. Okay. Anyway, it's richer because it has more detail. Sometimes you might deliberately not want detail. One thing that can be useful is to use the clarity slider to increase the contrast of the midtones. And I think that works nicely for this picture. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, again, you can see the before and the after. Okay, let's pick a different picture for increasing contrast. This picture here doesn't have very much contrast. It's also from Alan Kaprow's installation. See how my histogram, all the information's kind of in the middle? So if I don't have a black in this picture. So if I want to see a black, I'm going to have to drag that to the left until I start to see a little blue. And I want to see a white, I'm going to drag this to the right till I see a little red. And now I can see my midtones are pretty gray, so I'm going to bring those up. Maybe bring my white down a little. That's looking a little better. And so I'm negotiating all of these. I could bring my highlights up a little or down. Maybe up works good. That's kind of more interesting. Let's see, this is what I've done, and this is what I started with. Okay, and there's lots else I could do. Like I could simply just remove the contrast to the left, but I don't want to do that right now. I'm going to go back to my default and show you another way to do it, and that's the the tone curves is something similar to what we have in Photoshop called curves. So this parametric, it can be used either parametric or point. I usually use it point, but if until you use it, until you've used it for a while, you may not be ready to use it with point. So this is kind of like a fancy contrast slider. So this is the highlights area, this is the lights area, this is the darks area, and this is the shadows area. So this particular slider here will only affect this area. So I can bring that up, and it will only affect that area, which is kind of cool. Point is a little different. You create certain points. I usually start off with 3 points. The right side is going to be your highlights. The left, middle, your midtones, and the bottom, your shadows. So if I pull my shadows down, it makes the darks darker. And if I pull it up, it makes the shadows lighter. So in this case, so I'm creating an S-curve. I've increased the contrast. Let's say I want it to be a little lighter, then I raise this up. I want it darker, I bring it down. Or maybe I want to reduce the contrast. Then I would create an inverted S-curve. Very cool. If I don't like any of my decisions here, I simply delete these. Okay? So that's a couple ways of very neatly working with contrast, which is the dynamic range of your blacks and whites. It's easily misunderstood and mixed up with value. Basically, it means very low contrast is very gray, and very high contrast is no gray. All right, so what's the next decision? Does something need dodging or burning? Okay, well, let's look at this little threshold I photographed in Hawaii a couple years ago. Yes, I think this picture could use a little dodging and burning. Normally I do dodging and burning in Photoshop, but there's some very nice tools in Camera Raw for doing it as well. I think this area here needs to be brought down, needs to be burnt, and this area needs to be dodged to make it a little lighter. So I'm going to use my adjustment brush for that. And basically, I'm just going to, let's say if I want to make something darker, I'm going to reduce the exposure. If I want my highlights darker, for example, I can reduce the highlights and even bring the contrast down in those areas. I can set whatever I want, and then I can create the size of my brush by just simply moving the brackets key on my keyboard. And there's other ways, more complex ways to do that as well. So down on the bottom here, you'll see the size of the brush can also be adjusted by changing this. It's a very big brush. I prefer to use the brackets key because that way I can actually see it change without going back and forth. So I'm just going to darken this area a little bit. And if it's not darkening quickly enough, then I can reduce my exposure a little bit. And now I want to lighten that area on the bottom left. So I'm going to increase my shadows and this area I can slowly lighten. I usually do that in multiple passes. So this is before, and this is after. Very subtle changes, but it makes the picture a little nicer. Here's another image where that might be useful because I find the upper right hand corner is a little bit distracting here. So again, I can use my brush and I can maybe reduce the contrast of this area, reduce the highlights, and reduce the exposure. I can keep the shadows as it is. and maybe just paint that in a little bit. See that? It creates a little red red flag here that you can easily delete by hitting the escape button. You can see the before and the after. It's subtle. It's nice. Okay. So will the picture need to be retouched? This is one I usually you don't need to retouch digital images unless you have digital dust on your sensor, which frankly you often do. This particular image I took through a window, and sadly, the um, the um, the kind of dirtiness of the window looks a lot like dust, and so it doesn't matter whether it was actually there. It's a matter of whether I want it to be there in the picture, because I don't think those dust marks really enhance the picture at all. So I'm going to use this tool here, which is called the spot removal tool. And again, I can create the size of my brush and the feather of my brush exactly how I want it, and it's going to pick a spot. And if I don't like that spot, I can remove it, and I can keep on spot by spot removing various pieces of dust in my picture. And yeah, it could take a long time to do this. Again, I would probably do this in, you can see the before and after here in Photoshop using a clear adjustment layer. But over the years, the tools in Camera Raw have really improved. So much so that I try to do as much as I can in Camera Raw before I get to Photoshop, because that keeps the file size down. Every time change I make in Photoshop, I'm going to use an adjustment layer, and every time I do that, I'm going to increase the file size. So there's other ways to do it called smart objects, but I'm not going to address that just yet. Okay, so that's how you retouch. Finally, you're going to ask yourself in the darkroom in any event, and hopefully when you're working digitally, is there anything I could do to make this picture better? Oh, maybe I'd like to make it black and white. Let's see. Let's open this one. Well, it's okay in color, but I think this one might look good in black and white. And all I have to do is hit that button. Now that button used to be located over here in the HueSaturation panel, which it's now calling the black and white mix because I've hit the black and white button. So if I want my skies to be dark, for example, I can just drag that to the left because I know my skies are blue. Cool, huh? Now if I come back here to my, I decide, maybe I'd like that to be in color, and I could use my targeted adjustment tool, and I could maybe think I'd like to see what that sky looks like a little darker, and I can just drag that to the left, and it makes everything darker or lighter that I'm rolling my mouse over. And maybe I want that blue to be more saturated, so I'll move that to the right. Maybe I've overdone it here. This is the Akron Art Museum, by the way. I can even change the color of my sky. And I don't generally do stuff like that, but whatever moves you, you know. Let's look at a more subtle way of using some of these extra options that we don't really have in the darkroom. I'm not going to cover very many of those today, just a few. Like this one, again, the HueSaturation tool is enormously important. Again, if I want to make that, the sign is really the main feature of this. The yellow sign, or lack of a sign, is the main feature of this otherwise banal photograph. So if I want to make that a little lighter, I can do so by Just that to the right. Or I could just move my yellow slider to the right because I know it's yellow. Another thing I could do is, well, this brick is almost pale, so I could saturate my brick by bringing in some of that orange, you see. And I think that does make the picture a little bit more interesting. I could also do the opposite. I could make the brick completely black and white so that I can make the entire image except the sign black and white. Again, these are some of your aesthetic choices as you move through Camera Raw. Let's open up one more picture and think, well, here's a picture where I might want to increase the contrast because I can see here that I've got a lot of space on the left and right. But you know what? I'm not going to increase it because I took this picture in fog and I wanted it to look like fog. So I'm going to leave it alone. Sometimes it's better just to leave things alone. Now let's say I want to bring this into Photoshop. So factory defaults are often not very good. So if I'm going to bring it into Photoshop, I'm going to pick Adobe 1998. If I'm going to have it printed on a conventional printing press, I'm going to pick a different color space. Most likely, I'm only going to be using Adobe 1998 or sRGB. So if I'm going to use sRGB, then it's an infinitely smaller color space. Instead of having millions of colors, it only has thousands. So I don't recommend that unless you're going to print your picture on a 1-hour machine print or upload it to the web. Okay, so my default is 1998. I use 16 bits rather than 8 bits because that allows me to get in between things. It's sort of like a volume knob on your stereo that clicks. Sometimes you want to get in between those clicks. If you had twice the number of bits, you would be able to do it. Okay, standard resolution should be 300. I don't sharpen here. I think that should be either done in Camera Raw or in Photoshop. And sometimes I might want to open it as a smart object, but again, I'm not going to address that today. So I'm just going to click OK. Until I go back and change that, it's going to stay that way. If I want to save my image onto my desktop or to an external hard drive, then I'm going to name the image Fog in Ohio. And I'm going to determine what file format I want, which will depend whether or not I'm going to put it to the web, in which case I'd use a JPEG, or I'm going to put it make a fine print, in which case I would probably use TIFF, possibly Photoshop. Okay, and then since I'm if I'm using JPEG, I'll make sure I use sRGB. If I'm using TIFF, I'll make sure I use 1998. And again, I'm not going to resize to fit. I'm just going to let it be whatever size it was from the camera, and then I'm going to save it and it will export it. Okay, that's a really good way to save images without changing the color. It can be done in Photoshop, but it's confusing. If I wanted to open this picture in Photoshop now, I would just click Open Image. I'm not going to do that right now because I want this demo to end soon. If I didn't like any of the changes I made, or I decided that, you know what, this is maybe not an image I want to work with, I would just cancel. If I wanted to save the changes, I would go to Done. In this case, I'm just going to cancel. So let's see here. Let's say I want to, let's go back to this one. And let's say I like the original image, so I'm going to make a snapshot of it. I'm just going to click on that button and call it Original. Hit OK. Now I'm going to turn it to a black and white picture. And I'm going to maybe make the blues darker. Kind of like that. Okay, so now I'm going to make another snapshot, black and white. Okay, now I think I'll go back and work on it some more. Go back to color, and maybe I will make my sky darker. Using my adjustment tool, make it a little more saturated. That's too much. Saturation tool is the most overused tool in digital photography, so use it gingerly. And again, you can save a snapshot of that. Okay, so now I can go back and forth between my original, my color enhanced image, my black and white image, and I can make more variations of this. And it will save it until if I hit the done button. If I cancel it, it won't save it. So I'm going to go done, so it saves it. And it will save it in whatever form I was clicked on when I last saw it. All right, so that's probably already way more than you want to know about Camera Raw. There's lots more to learn. We could do this for 12 hours, but we're not going to. So I'll be back soon with digital demo number 3, where I'll show how to do some retouching in Photoshop and maybe some dodging and burning, how to work with adjustment layers and so forth. But again, we won't touch on very much of Photoshop either. We're just focusing on the basics right now. Take care and have a wonderful day.